Welcome to the Wandering Tangent Podcast. I'm BJ. With me is Jeff. Today we're talking about the 2000... I don't even know how to categorize this movie. Thriller? Drama?
Yeah, what is it exactly?
Anyway, we're talking
Mysterious
about...
movie that is different than other movies.
But at any rate, we're talking about the 2000 film Unbreakable.
Yeah. So what did you think of this movie, BJ?
Oh, you cut me off. I was going to try to ask you about that first. But anyway...
Well, I was faster to the draw.
Yeah. Force of habit, I guess. Anyway...
I can go first. Hey, I can do it.
Well, too late now. You already asked.
Too late now.
Ha.
Okay.
You cut me off, now I cut you off. Here we go. Anyway, so this was my choice of movie this time around because I had not seen this film for quite some time, but I remember thinking generally good things about it. But yeah, I quite enjoyed this movie.
Okay. So you liked it. You're a fan.
Yeah.
You would recommend it to other people.
I would. How about you?
Well, I have mixed feelings on it.
Oh,
I don't know if I necessarily like it or don't like it. I'm gonna say it's an all right movie. It has a few things in it that I probably struggle with, but I'm gonna say it's probably on the better side of things. I think it's a good movie, and I recommend people give it a watch. I do, but it's not a huge favorite of mine.
So you didn't quite find the mythical ideal of a movie I like that you don't.
Do I not like the movie? I can't say I don't like it. I'd say that it's a movie that I really want to love, but there's a few things that just are not. I don't know if it quite gets there for me. Okay. And we'll go. There's a lot to talk about with that, but I think that most people are going to watch this movie, and I guess a handful of people will like it. I think most people generally think it's an interesting movie. There's a lot of things that happen in it and most people will like it, but it's not a movie that I think most people are going to go back and rewatch and they're going to talk a lot about. And people, when they are together at a restaurant, they'll say, "Oh, remember that movie? That's a great film." It's not one of those movies where people talk about it and it comes up in conversations, and it's not as much, not really. It's not really a bad movie, though. There's a lot of good things about it.
I feel like this movie kind of started in a strange place because this was the second film by M. Night Shyamalan, whose big claim to fame was The Sixth Sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking at the time, I didn't see this in theaters, but my family rented it sometime after that. But like even looking at the Wikipedia page for it, the studio Touchstone didn't market it as what it is, which is basically a superhero movie. Instead, they kind of tried to market it as a psychological thriller because
it's kind of that too, though.
Yeah. It kind of is, but it also kind of isn't. But yeah, that's why I kind of had a hard time like placing this film in the genre, because
it's one of the things I like about it, though, is that it doesn't fit very well in a particular genre. I would say it's cerebral, and it wants to be a superhero movie, which you could easily argue that it is. But yeah, it doesn't completely fit anywhere, at least not cleanly, not like obviously.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anyway. So you just want to get right into it, and we can spoil things, and you can talk about why you're kind of wishy-washy, undecided.
Yes.
Neutral, shall we say?
I'd say it's an all right movie. I'm gonna give it a middle of the road rating. It's a movie that really, I think, could have been a little bit better, but at the same time, there are things about it I really like. There's no way to describe it. We'll just have to go in and talk about to spoil the things that happen in the movie and talk in depth about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's talk about it.
All right, let's do it. Spoilers are now in play. So, M. Night Shyamalan, I don't know if I said his name right.
Close enough, I think.
Yeah. he is I'll say good things and then bad things. The good things is there's nobody like him. He's probably one of the most unique people to make films because his movies, I don't think there's very other people that copy his work. Not really. I don't think he necessarily copies anyone else to a great extent. He's very much his own thing, and the people in his film are so mellow and calm. He doesn't have them like jump up and down screaming at all. They're people that have he uses their calmness as a way to build suspense. That's which is interesting to me. I like that about him. But I've never really liked his movies because I think that the things he builds up to are not as dramatic as they could be. It's like he holds together this storyline and he's going to reveal something unique and different, and when he does reveal it, it's not quite enough, I think, that it was built up to. So, yeah. That being said, it's I generally don't like most of his films, and I think they're a lot more predictable than people make them out to be. They say that his movies they often have this twist to them that is like earth-shatteringly different and to what you would expect that happens, but they're not all that surprising. Not really. The twists are not huge to me. They're not as clever. But at the same time, it's not that he's bad at stuff. I think he's pretty good. And I actually really like how he does things his own way. And the calmness of the characters and how he uses they don't jump up and down screaming when things go wrong. They don't do that. They sort of like just focus on what it is that's happening, and they just lean in, and they have a deep what would you call it? Like they just have a deep focus on something, which I like. I like it. It's good. It's good.
Well, I feel like to some sort of extent, he kind of got, what's the word? He got fairly or unfairly placed into the niche of him being, oh, he's the guy whose all his movies have twist endings because sort of
yeah.
Because like Sixth Sense is pretty famous for its big ending, and then Unbreakable also had kind of a twist ending, and I guess Signs kind of has a twist ending.
I did not finish watching The Sixth Sense. I turned it off. I've never gotten to the end of it, but watching it, it's just so obvious to me that what the ending is. It wasn't surprising at all. So I never, yeah. No. Anyway.
Yeah.
But he also did The Village, right? People
Yes.
really liked The Village. That was another famous one. I never really liked The Village as much either.
I don't know if The Village was really that well liked.
Really?
I don't think I've seen The Village, so I can't really say one way or the other. I'm looking at his list.
I have seen most of The Village, and
I'm looking at his filmography. I've seen The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs. I think I watched Lady in the Water, and
oh, he did Lady in the Water?
Yeah.
That's a horror film. Like big time horror film, right? No, I'm thinking of What Lies Beneath, I think. Yeah. Okay.
No, Lady Water's kind of weird.
Okay. Kind of weird. Yes, and the movie that we haven't mentioned, he did an action movie, which was Avatar, The Last Airbender, the live action version.
I actually have indeed seen that as well, which is hilarious because I haven't watched the cartoon, but...
Yeah, that is funny. You have not watched the cartoon.
Well, you know...
You of all people in this world, I would have expected to have watched the cartoon.
I just was never really just never really got around to it. It's one of those things I always meant to watch, but then again, you know, to be fair,
let me explain.
I mean, I know generally what happens, and like I said, I've seen the movie, and I know that the movie like tries to condense like a couple of seasons worth of cartoon into 2-hour-ish movie and kind of fails spectacularly at it.
Yeah, it did. Um, it doesn't add up that you wouldn't have watched it because you like anime,
I
and
just never got around to it.
yeah,
I mean, you're talking to the guy that I think in the when we started doing this podcast, like about 8 months ago, starting like August or something. I've watched more movies like since we started watching the podcast, and like in the last like 3 years, I think.
it's gotten you to actually start watching things.
Yeah, I've.
Yeah, The Last Airbender was a big flop. And it's a great storyline, it's good characters. Condensing it into a movie is super hard. Much harder than Lord of the Rings condensing into a movie. In that's a huge challenge that was pulled off. But
Lord
it
of
was
Rings,
yeah.
Lord of the Rings also had like 9 movies, and then they did The Hobbit, and they did the opposite, where crap, we have to make a short book last 3 movies. Well, what can we shoehorn in? Now,
Yeah.
I actually haven't. I've only ever seen the first Hobbit movie. I never watched the other 2 because I watched it at home and I totally fell asleep watching the first Hobbit movie.
Yeah.
If I can read the book in less time than it takes to watch the movies, what's the point?
Well, the book is a lot more of a charming story.
Yeah, the book is not very long. Don't know why they had to try to cram that into 3 movies or stretch it out into 3 movies, I should say.
It is hard. It's hard to make a book into a movie. It can be difficult. And The Last Airbender, that movie that was made by M. Night Shyamalan, it really struggled a lot. It's not his style at all. It's not what he's good at. He's never done an action anything. He always does suspense, horror, mystery, things like that. So it was just outside of his particular niche that he was good at. I think making an Avatar live action movie would be a great thing. I don't know if anyone will try it again, but if they get a director who's an action director, then they could probably pull it off. But he just wasn't the right fit for it. And I'm kind of torn because I really love that, because Hollywood is full of so many like over-the-top performances where people just are emotionally charged up and they're jumping up and down like they're I don't know, they're hyped up on caffeine to an extreme.
They're
like
emoting.
They're emoting. There's so many strong, dramatic emotions and so much entertainment. It gets kind of exhausting. And this movie, Unbreakable, it's different than that. And a lot of his movies are different than that, where drama is not about the excitement of the characters. It's about the just how intrigued they are and how they react. Because if you see something strange or hear something or somebody tells you something that's weird, most humans don't like go bananas. What they do is they sit there quietly and kind of like stare and go, what are you telling me? I think in some ways it's a lot more realistic, and that's what I really like about his movies, is that when Bruce Willis, his character, is sitting there and he's talking to this comic book guy who is telling him something that is very hard to believe. And he's not a weird comic, like the Bruce Willis guy. He's not a weird comic book crazy guy. He's a jock. He's an athlete who's he's not in the comic book world at all. This is just weird to him. And so the way he reacts, which is very calm but also kind of direct, and he just kind of calmly listens to him. I like it. It's so good. It's so good. And I don't think most people will appreciate it for what it is, because they're used to the normal performance, which is people getting really wild and crazy in front of the camera. Kind of like like the Nicolas Cage kind of freak out, where they just kind of like go crazy over things.
Not the bees. That's only Nicolas Cage quote I know.
Not the bees. I don't know that movie.
Is it the Wicker Man? I don't know. I like something, but I actually haven't seen that many Nick Cage movies, so I don't know.
I like his earlier stuff. Raising Arizona is a great movie.
Well, that was kind of before
Yeah,
he got famous, right?
yeah, that was early on. Um, yeah. So about Unbreakable,
Hmm.
I like the storyline, but there's certain things that I don't know. This it's a good well written script. I just wish that it was I don't know, the twist ending is a little too cold for me. I really would have wanted a happier ending, especially to make Samuel L. Jackson's character, I don't know, a little bit more of a positive side to it. The fact that it was negative in the end, I know that people like a twist, but I actually would have liked something more meaningful for his character to come out. I mean, he's the opposite of Bruce Willis. He's the guy who gets hurt. I would like almost like some sort of great thing to come out of his hardship. The fact that he has always had these problems. What comes out of him is that he becomes a supervillain on a quest to find some sort of superhero. And it would have been, I would have liked it something more positive for his character, so that they're both positive. But then you don't really have a villain. You don't really have a super villain.
Well, from what I've read, it seems like the what's the word for it? The common consensus is that uh, Samuel L. Jackson's character Elijah didn't really go into this thinking that he was going to be he was going to end up being a supervillain. I think the common consensus is that it's it's shortly before the last scene where they shake hands that he comes to the conclusion that by figuring out who and what David Dunn is being a superhero, it's it's not that he was a villain in search of a hero. It's that when he found a hero and then when he examined his own actions, he came to the conclusion that he was in fact the bad guy, the villain. So it
So he
was
came
sort of,
to you're saying that he came to that conclusion. It wasn't
yeah.
something that he was planning on and plotted for
No, I
because he wanted to create a comic book world in real life. That was his real quest, is to take this
well,
fantasy into reality.
I don't think that was really what he was going for because in quite a few scenes he talks about how he feels like comic books is sort of a form of storytelling that's becoming lost
Mm-hmm.
that was perhaps based in some sort of real thing but had since been jazzed up and made marketable.
Yeah.
So his thing was that uh there could be such a thing as superheroes, but it wouldn't be in like the comic book sense. I mean, there's
It wouldn't fit into a box like the way a comic book fits into a frame.
yeah
I
he
like that line. There was a line in there that, yeah.
yeah I was gonna say he basically tells that Bruce Willis when Bruce Willis admits to the fact that in the car accident that he kept saying he was hurt, and after that he couldn't play sports anymore. But it turns out he just faked the injury so that he could marry his wife because his wife didn't think that she could live that sort of lifestyle. So he used a car accident as a way to get out of that. But yeah, he calls Elijah. He says, "What do I do now?" And it's a really good scene. Oh, he and Samuel L. Jackson character tells him to go where people are, and that's okay, be afraid, because this part's not going to be like a comic book. Life doesn't, what does he say? Life doesn't go in boxes drawn for it or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good line. Yeah. Yeah, and he's
So I don't think it was like trying to like make like a comic book world. He was more trying to find the the trying to find the truth behind the storytelling, and along the way accidentally figured out what his role in it was, and his role was to be the villain.
hmm, his role was to be the villain. Yeah, it's interesting. It is an interesting bit of writing. Um And it's true that a lot of ancient cultures did do something that's you might call similar to comic books. They did draw pictures as they were telling stories a lot of times, and like the Egyptians had like pictures of people and interacting and all that, and then they would have the text underneath that explained what it was. And then I know the Greeks drew on pots, and they'd often have pictures of things that went along with what was happening. So, like writing something and then creating an illustration for it. It is something that's an old art form. I don't, and the fact that we still do it today. I mean, humans. I think history repeats itself because it's always about people. In the end, people repeat themselves through generations. So, it. I like how they like echo into these great ideas. They don't really sit there and explain it all for you. It's like they just kind of say it in a few lines and then move on, and it's enough to create a lot of mystery, and it also gives you kind of this intriguing idea, but at the same time, it doesn't explain everything for you. It just does enough to hook you in, and then you're on to the next thing. And I like that when movies do that. They don't have to over-explain. Um, and yeah, it's very good.
So is
Um,
that your so is that your big problem with the movie was the twist at the end? You didn't like the twist, so-called twist?
what's my big problem with the movie? I think the big problem is when it comes down to like there when he learns what his weakness is, it's his weakness is water. That was I was like, really? It's just water? That is such a simple thing to have a weakness for. It does pay off well later because then he falls into the pool, um, which makes for a dramatic scene. Um, I
Well,
don't
I
know. I
mean,
think that the thing, it's not that, like I mentioned earlier, it's not that I hate the movie. I mean, it's pretty good. It's
it
just
just
that
didn't
I
work
wish,
with you on some levels.
no, on some levels it didn't. And some levels it worked very well. I love the tone and the pacing of it. I like the characters they come up with. Everything's really good. And I love the way people react to things. I think that's one of his great signatures, is that he knows that human beings are not always drama weirdos. They react to things um, in usually a more calm and surprised way, and it doesn't do well on the screen because people want people to jump up and down and flail their arms. But in reality, they're just going to just watch from a distance, and the way he does all that is great. Um, yeah, I just feel like I really wanted Samuel Jackson's character to not be the villain, but in fact be a recruiting, um, kind of like superheroes often have a friend
You want him to
that
be Nick
helps them.
Fury.
Nick Fury, yeah, I want him to be Dr. Fury.
Dr. Fury.
I just because he calls him to action. It's like in the hero's journey, Samuel L. Jackson is calling him to action. And this is like this movie is like a hero's journey that really heavily focuses on the beginning of the hero's journey and less about the other parts to it.
Yeah, it.
Um,
Gonna cut you off for a second here, just
yeah,
to.
go ahead.
So I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff that's on my DVD. Apparently, the movie was originally planned as being a trilogy, and it ended up being that in the end, but not the way they expected. But at the time, because it kind of did end up being a trilogy, but Unbreakable came out in 2000, and then the next movie in the quote-unquote series didn't come out till 2016. And at the time, wasn't, and like in the marketing for Split, and spoiler alert, by the way, I guess, for everything else in this series, but I guess if you didn't know by now, it's been 5 years, so sorry, I'm spoiling for you. So at the time, Split was not even marketed as like being a tie-in to Unbreakable. I guess that's like a thing at the end that comes in and makes it part of the same world. And then Glass came out in 2019. But at the time when it was made in 2000, it was originally written as being part of a trilogy, but I guess the studios didn't think it would do that well, and at the time, I guess it didn't do great. It kind of became sort of a more liked movie later on, I guess as the stigma of having your movie be about superheroes kind of fell by the wayside, because lo and behold, I think the most profitable movies ever are now all superhero movies, right? Like the
Yeah.
Avengers and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, in the in the bonus features, there was Shyamalan said the studios fought really hard to not market it as a superhero movie because they didn't think superhero movies could be successful. So that's why they
Funny.
kind of marketed it as a as sort of a kind of tried to market it as a scary movie instead, because Shyamalan was still riding the wave from The Sixth Sense.
Mm-hmm. Which
So it's
is a
kind of,
horror movie. Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of a movie that came out like 12 years too soon.
That's a good point.
Because
Yeah, I think the audience today would like it a lot better than really the ones that saw
yeah,
it back then.
I mean, people say it about now, but if it got released now, people are like, oh, it's a brilliant dissection of the superhero movie. It's a what's the
Yeah.
word? What's the word I'm looking for? Uh, Not really a send up, because it takes itself very seriously and doesn't mock like the tropes or anything. It's what's the word? I can't think of the word right now. I knew the word last night when I was thinking about it, but now I don't know the word. Vocabulary, why? Anyway, I cut you off. So now I derailed your line of thought like the train in the movie.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, I really should like the movie. It really is well done in a lot of ways. So I guess
I mean,
it doesn't follow the hero's journey, and that's a real snobby thing for me to say, because the writers chose to do things differently, and I don't think what they did was necessarily bad or wrong. Um, it's interesting, and I just think that if a superhero has a weakness, I almost would have wanted like Samuel L. Jackson to have a different kind of super ability. Like he has been through terrible hardship his entire life because of his illness. And what he has is an ability to keep going, a will to survive and try again. He has learned that no matter how many times he becomes broken, he can heal and come back, and he can endeavor to do something. And so he has will to go on. And Bruce Willis's character has this ability to survive everything, yet he doesn't emotionally survive. Like the things that he goes through makes him lose the willpower. And I almost get that sense from the two of them, but they didn't really go in that direction. I would have had something like that, where although they're physically opposites from each other, they both have something that each other needs, and Samuel L. Jackson's character can somehow call him to action and provide him some sort of psychological strength to go on and to find meaning in his life. Because Bruce Willis, he's kind of like lost. He doesn't know where he is or what he's doing, and he has a family, but he just doesn't feel like happy. And the answer is it's because he needs to do more with his power. He has a power that he needs to somehow use so it doesn't get wasted. And that's where his feelings are coming from. So I almost think that I like the movie. It's a good movie, but I wish that maybe there was some kind of story element that was somehow in it that would be even more intriguing. But it might be like too wishful.
so
My
are you
report,
saying
it might be a little too extreme, because it is good just the way it is in a lot of
so?
ways.
So I think I lost the train of thought there. So are you saying that they do do that, or they don't do that? The thing with by Bruce Willis's character, by him finding his call, he feels more He feels
Well, they
more.
do. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say because don't they do that? Because they talk about
they
how
kind of do
he
that. I think they get close to it, but they never really spell it out.
they kind of do
And
because they mention a few times that even though he has a wife, he has a family, he wakes up in the morning with like a sense of sadness and he can't figure out why, and that's sort of a barrier between him and his wife because there's the scene where him and his wife go out for dinner as they're sort of trying to rekindle their relationship, and
yeah.
she asks him if he she asks him if he knows that he has kept her and their son at arm's length, and he's like, yeah, I realize that because I I don't feel right, but I don't know why.
Hmm.
But then he does, but after he embraces his power and he goes and has his first uh first mission, first superhero thing, him in the last scene, like the first thing Elijah asks is if he still feels the sadness when he wakes up, and Bruce Willis says no because he has found his purpose in life.
Hmm.
And they kind of show that because like he goes home after he saves the kids and he talks with his wife, and in the morning they're not awkward like they were before. When the kid comes downstairs in the kitchen, they're talking to each other. They're they are they're looking at each other in the eyes. So it's like because he found his purpose, he's starting to be able to fix other things in his life by lowering the barriers between him and his family.
Yeah.
So
All
I
of that is
think it
good storyline. Yeah. It's
so I
good.
think it does do that, but maybe
So you're
not
saying
for you.
I kind of said like I needed to be more like this, and you kind of said, but it is like that.
I think it is like that. I mean, I suppose I should ask: is this the first time you've seen this movie, or is it like the first time you've
Yes,
seen this movie in a while?
I have tried to watch this movie, but I couldn't get through the beginning of it, and I
Okay.
turned it off. So I've never seen it all the way through.
Okay, so I've seen it a few times, and I watched some stuff in preparation of watching it. So maybe I was just more primed to
Well, you make a good point there. Maybe
pick
it
up the
is a
clues,
little
I should say.
too subtle. Um, yeah. His his weakness is that it's water. Water is his weakness.
Oh,
Um,
well,
I don't know
drowning
if
per
any of
se,
that
I should say,
drowning, which yeah,
because it's
I
not
don't
like you throw
know.
water on him. He's like, oh, water. It's just he.
I know because he's in the rain all the time. It's specifically drowning when he gets enveloped in water.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it seems kind of like just thrown in there to me. Not really like a big story, something that's heavily cerebral at all. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's fine. And the fact that they worked it into the later scene where he falls into the pool, it's a good way to set things up and then have a payoff. That's what happens in good movies is you set things up and then you have the payoff. Um,
So
and you have that
it's
suspenseful moment where you realize, yeah, this is his weakness. It's water, and he's in it. He's fallen into the pool, and there's that shroud, that like the pool cover he gets trapped in. That yeah, it's good. It's good.
so it sounds like it's one of those things that you can like acknowledge that it's good, but it just wasn't for you, kind of, sorta.
Yeah,
Which happens, everyone has their
yeah.
tastes.
There's a reason why I couldn't get through it. It just didn't have enough things to really draw me in. Which is probably it could be my failing. I don't know. It might be that I'm just not seeing it for what it really is.
It
I
always
don't
cracks,
know.
always cracks me up when you say stuff like that, and yet one of your favorite movies is Star Trek The Motion Picture.
I know.
It's like, how does that work?
Well, you know how it works is that the first time I watched it, I wasn't interested at all. When I watched it as a kid, I'm like, ugh, I'll just watch Wrath of Khan and not watch this one again. That's my mentality when I was a kid. But now, after rewatching them and watching them over and over again, that's the movie that I think is it's good after you've seen it many times and you've thought about it many, many more times. It's a good movie. Maybe Unbreakable is more like that, where it's a good movie when you actually stop and think about it for longer. Um, I really like. You can say I'm ready to move on to something else, unless you have more to add.
No,
Okay, but I
Go ahead.
really like what is his name? Elijah?
Yeah, Elijah.
Yeah, his character I really like. He was born with this terrible, struggling illness, which is really not something I would ever. I mean, it's hard to even imagine. Like you get injured easily. Um, but then his mother gives him a comic book. You know, his very good mother sees that he's struggling, and she just tries to introduce something to him, um, to help him know that, here you can learn about things and be obsessed with things. And he's a very intelligent person, and so he spends his life of becoming obsessed with comics, which I imagine when he was young and doing that, it didn't matter. And then as he grows older, comic books have really grown in a sense. They were just junky entertainment 50, 60 years ago, and they've become this major cultural phenomenon now, where the comic book movies are the highest grossing in Hollywood. And I think it's interesting. He obsesses about it, and he really gets really in depth with the story of it and tries to discover something more and think critically about it, which is good because that's kind of like what I like to do with movies. I love to try to think deeply about them, even if it doesn't like become anything. It's still fun, which is ironic because I always struggled in English classes. We would read books. We were in the same classes, you and I, but I
To
never
be
really
fair,
liked
most
English classes. Yet if suddenly we pull out a comic book and we start talking in depthly about that, I'm way interested. But if we're talking about some other book that's commonly used in an English class, I'm less interested.
to
Um,
be fair, I mean, I am much more of a reader than you are, shall we say? But
that's
like
true.
like even I like struggle with the classics. Like I have two quote unquote classic books that I love: A Christmas Carol and Dracula. Almost
Hmm.
every other classic I've tried to read, I just didn't really get. Like I read Frankenstein. I'm like, it's just Dr. Frankenstein's whining travelogue.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna alienate a lot of people here, so trying to p- pick and choose what books I'm gonna make fun
Well,
of.
it's not that they're bad books. I mean, books from the 1800s are very interesting, insightful books, but they were the first of their kind. And when you're the first one to make something, to write about something, you tend to go into a lot of detail and explain it all
Yeah, I was.
because it's not like, see, today when somebody makes a monster movie, people go, "Oh yeah, they're monsters." We know because movies have monsters in them. But if you're
Yeah,
in the 1800s, you might have to go into a lot more depth about what a monster is. Like, how did this monster come about? And a lot of things, because people aren't used to this introduction of a new genre, and their attention span was different.
yeah. I
They
was gonna.
were
Sorry, go
okay
ahead.
with the long detail. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say like when you read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, a large part of the book is him describing what all the fish look like. But you try to read it nowadays. I've seen pictures of these fish, so I don't need to read a paragraph per
Exactly.
fish.
Yeah, and I have actually read that book, believe it or not. I have read a few books. I read that one. I was surprised how little happens in the book. It's them exploring one ocean and then another and then another and another. And it's more like a National Geographic tour of the ocean than it is a story about everything else that it's more famous for.
Though after
Uh,
finding, sorry, I'm gonna cut you off real quick.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Though after finding how much I read, I will mention this to prove that I am an idiot. It wasn't until after, it wasn't until I like reading the book, I'm like, oh, 20,000 Leagues Under Sea is how far they traveled under the sea.
I didn't know that either until someone pointed that out to me recently.
Not what the depth was, because I live in the desert. I have no idea how much a league is. 20,000 leagues under sea, they'd be like 10,000 miles underwater. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot more sense.
It does.
It makes a whole lot more sense because it never made sense. 20,000 leagues under the sea.
How far is the league? I don't know.
20,000, that's really deep.
Yeah, so yeah, that's how far they traveled, not how deep they went. Just in
Yeah.
case you didn't know. I've blown someone's mind there with that.
Mm-hmm. Now I need to find out how big a league is.
Is this our new Google contest? So you figures how much a league is? League. No, not that kind of league. League. Distance. 3 miles.
3 miles.
60,000 miles under the sea. What's the circumference of the Earth?
Let's see. It is over 40 nautical miles. Yeah, the ocean is not 20,000 leagues deep then.
Yeah, 20.
That is like hugely deeper than.
Yeah. Yeah,
so we all just assumed that's what the title was.
60,000 miles would be about 30 miles would be about 30,000 miles away from Earth, because the circumference of Earth is about 25,000 miles. So yeah, they have been way under the sea.
Oh, 40,000 nautical miles. Yeah, I read that wrong. Yeah,
what's the difference between a nautical mile and
I know the answer to that. A nautical mile is a measure of this. It's based upon the circumference of the Earth, because a mile is based upon one point to another. But what they did for a nautical mile is they took the 360 degrees of the Earth's curvature, and then they divided that into, each degree has 60 parts, and then in each of those parts there's another 60 of those. And I think that's a nautical mile. So basically, a nautical mile is useful because it fits into the circle of the Earth.
It's not that I don't trust you, but I might have to check it out afterwards.
It is that you don't trust me. It's that I screwed up on all our other measurement conversations. So now you're just like, there's no way he could be right at this point.
Just last time we talked about a measurement, you were the one trying to convince me that AU was like 10 light years or something like that. I don't know. But we don't have
Google's
to go there.
Fault. I think Google's is trying to make me look bad, because I looked it up.
I Googled the exact same thing you did. We Googled the same thing.
But Google is somehow trying to make it's feeding me wrong information. It's part of its conspiracy somehow. I don't know. Never mind.
Google's ingenious plot to turn Jeff into a supervillain. He just keeps feeding him the wrong information.
That's right. It's all against me somehow. It's all Obi-Wan's fault. He did it.
The AI is trying to kill Jeff because Jeff's going to be John Connor or something. I don't know. Ugh.
Pretty sad, actually, if I was John Connor, because I don't know how to do most of the things.
Okay, what were we talking about?
I think you were going to try to prove me wrong on what a nautical mile is, but we don't need to talk about that.
No, I wasn't talking about that. I was trying to backtrack to how we got to Google trying to kill you from Unbreakable.
Yeah.
This is when we
tangent. No, but that conversation tangent was
that was a good one.
That was.
We haven't had a chance like that in ages.
Okay, so let's just talk about Unbreakable. Okay. Yeah, I don't think most people bump into each other in a crowded subway or train station, right?
Not
really. Like, if you were in a big train station, people are pretty good about not touching other people and walking around them. So he stands there, he puts his arms out and like brushes against people's hands as they walk by. If you saw that in a train station, would you think that guy was kind of weird and actually step a little bit further away from him and make sure you didn't bump into him?
I mean, would you really notice?
I think so. Person in a big raincoat like that, and they're putting their hands out in front of you. I don't think I would pretend like I didn't notice, because you don't want to make eye contact or get them to notice you.
Well, he didn't put his hands out in front of him. He just kind of held them off to the side so that he was taking up a little more space. I mean, I'm pretty tall, so my navigation through crowds is a bit different than everyone else's.
People just get out of your way.
Well, I can see over most people's heads, so I can tell where the gaps are. But I always had thoughts about this, when I went to the local Comic-Con or whatever, and there's the big crowd on the vendor floor. and I'm just being me. I'm tall. I can see over people. I'm like, I can never quite understand what it would feel like to be like in the same crowd, but like only be able to see the back of the head of the person in front of me.
Yeah, I can tell you from my own experience. Yeah, it's a lot harder because you really don't know, what's in front of you. You kind of have to like lean and look around. And if you're in a big crowd, yeah.
So maybe there's just
Yeah.
so maybe I mean we also don't live in an area that's like super crowded, right? Our
Yeah.
our metro
We don't,
area is not very metro as compared to say way they are on the East Coast where people are crammed in like shoulder to shoulder. So
yeah.
maybe that's so maybe incidental context thing that happens more often in like a big city train station or whatever. Who knows?
Anyway, so, yeah. And the people he bumps against, they all seem to be doing some sort of criminal behavior. He comes across a lot of crime, a lot of sinister crime too. But he finds the darkest one and then pursues that one.
Well, like I was wondering just last night when I was watching it, it's like what's the legal cutoff for something to off his power? Like are petty crimes going to do that? Is like a pickpocket going to set off his alarm, or does it have to be like a still over $1,000 and stuff before it to kick off because he picks up a few things. He picks up like a lady who like steals some jewelry, a guy who drive by and smashes a bottle against a lady's skull. It's like, what's the cutoff point, right?
Yeah. Well, there's the other thing, which they don't mention, but I guess it can be kind of implied, but there's a lot of those crimes he can't do anything about because you have to prove that the crime happened. And how do you get evidence of that? If you just confront them, it's your word against them. So the unique thing about the guy who had done the worst of the crimes, which is to tie up the family and to the home invasion, there's actual real victims that he could go and save in that situation.
Yeah.
So it was unique. It was the one he picked because of that.
Yeah, you're talking about... I'm going to call him this because it's actually one of the tracks on the soundtrack it's called this, but I think you're talking about the Orange Man.
Yeah, the Orange Man.
I think that's another thing you kind of pick up in more than one viewing of this movie is how everyone kind of has their own color.
Really?
Like Samuel L. Jackson's character is always wearing purple. David Dunn is always wearing green. And a lot of people he bumps into in like the train station are wearing very bright colors. Like there's the lady who steals the jewelry is wearing red. The guy who smashes the bottle over another lady's wearing yellow. The sexual assaulter is wearing bright green, and the murderer...
It's a different green.
Yeah,
it's a brighter green, not a darker green.
Yeah, it's a very bright green, and the guy ends up going after the psychopath murderer is wearing bright orange. So yeah,
they all get their own color, and he has the Bruce Willis character has the security coat that he wears at the games, which is very very green, and then his raincoat is a dark green.
I think it's the same coat, it's sort of the poncho, which as the story goes on and in some lighting is very reminiscent of a cloak and cowl, almost like they did that on purpose.
Why would they do that on purpose? I'm lost. I don't follow your train of thought. But I'm interested to learn. Go ahead.
So his poncho, right? He wears the poncho. It's backlit. It looks a lot like, shall we say, a cape.
Oh, okay.
And the hood hides his face like a
mask.
Like a mask, a cowl, shall we say?
Oh, okay.
Are you picking up what I'm putting down?
Yes, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Okay. All right.
So yeah. So not that you have to watch the movie again, but I feel like it's a movie that can be watched again if you feel like it, and you'll pick up on more things.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about
not that. Say that, not say it'd be enough to make you like it, or like it more, I should say, because you don't necessarily dislike it.
I don't dislike it, no. But, yeah. Huh. All right. So,
So, anything else you want to bring up, or do you think we've ran the course on this conversation? Well,
um,
well, well, I guess while you're thinking, I will say, very good soundtrack. Super great soundtrack.
you like the soundtrack.
I like the soundtrack. The soundtrack was, believe it or not, I don't know why I remember this, but the Unbreakable CD was actually the first thing I bought off Amazon.
Was it?
Yeah. It's a good soundtrack. James Newton Howard.
I don't really remember the music very much. It wasn't really noteworthy to me. But it was symphony music. It seemed to like in fact there were a lot of scenes where there wasn't any music.
They do definitely do that, like when he goes in the house as he's going after the orange man, like right up until the orange man like gets a drop on him and throws him off the balcony into the pool. There's no music in that scene as he sort of explores the house trying to figure out like where the bad guy is and what happened.
Yeah, I definitely like that. Sometimes you can overuse dramatic music on every scene. Sometimes still leaving it out can add a sense of suspense of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I was watching it, I know that his movies usually have twists, and I didn't remember if there was a twist, or I guess there probably would have been, but I was sort of suspecting that the real twist is that he wouldn't have a superpower after all, and it was really just Samuel Jackson dreaming this all up, and that he would get badly hurt in the end. That was one of the things I was kind of expecting to happen. And when he fell into the pool, I thought, well, perhaps there's some opportunity for him to not have a superpower because he only fell into the pool. It could be that he really just somehow survived the accident. You could just explain that way in the script, that it was just a miraculous thing. He was just in the right place at the right time, and the way he landed and everything, and no objects ran into him in the crash, something like that. Or that he was protected somehow because of his position in the car, and there could have been some kind of revelation that came out of it like that. But the movie didn't go that way. I was suspecting that it might.
That's kind of the downsides with kind of movies with twist endings, is that they kind of is whether or not you feel the twist work kind of paints your overall opinion of the film. So sometimes with this movies, it's worth going back and watching again with the twist in mind, because if it's a good twist, it makes sense on a second viewing. If it's a bad twist, it still doesn't make sense. I think, while it's not my favorite twist, I think it fits.
It's all right.
At very least, Samuel L. Jackson sells the heck out of it in the last scene.
Yep, he does. Samuel L. Jackson he always does a great performance. He has just this, he has a sharp intellect, and his character always seems to have a way of just putting things plainly in front of you and explaining it all. So Samuel L. Jackson's always good. It's hard to imagine anything that he's in that isn't all that great. It's hard.
I'm sure there's something, but probably something I haven't seen.
Yeah, I generally like Bruce Willis stuff too.
Well,
but
I know at least one Bruce Willis movie you don't like.
Yeah.
Armageddon.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yep, I don't like Armageddon.
The movie we didn't watch.
Yeah.
Instead, we watched The Burbs, and well, at least you like that one.
And you hated it. You hated The Burbs.
We know my opinion about The Burbs. I talked ad nauseum about that in the Burbs episode.
Yep. Okay, so do you feel like this really captures the superhero genre, that anybody who likes comic books is going to really enjoy this storyline?
I think it works as a sort of more grounded version of superhero. I mean, it is very much a superhero origin story that kind of stops short of like him donning the cape and revealing himself to the public or what have you, as a lot of superhero movies nowadays goes. But yeah, I like it. I definitely feel like if it had come out in, say, the 2010s sometime, like around when Marvel movies were starting to take off, that more people would know about and it would probably have a bigger following, but it kind of came out 15 years too early for it to really be super popular, I think.
Hmm.
It was
Well, it did have some popularity to it.
well, I don't think it was as popular as like The Sixth Sense was.
And The Sixth Sense was very popular.
Yeah, and
Everyone raved about that movie when it came out, and I just thought,
and I've
yeah.
I've not looked at like the box office totalers or anything like that, but I feel like The Sixth Sense and Signs are the two M. Night Shyamalan movies that people have seen. I feel like Unbreakable kind of flew under the radar because it didn't have like a great marketing campaign and it didn't really fit the marketing. Like the movie itself didn't really go along with like what the marketing was. So
Yeah.
I think people kind of went in expecting another Sixth Sense, and instead it was a comic book movie in disguise. So
Which is more interesting to me. I think this is probably his best movie. Unbreakable. The Signs has a lot of the same kind of things as this movie has, where the characters are just intrigued by it rather than just being completely over the top in panic. But I think the thing about Signs is that the aliens are just so average alien in that they're not like interesting alien. They're just like normal generic sci-fi alien, which doesn't work as well for me in that movie. Because I think aliens, it's this huge subject of aliens, and we tend to like in entertainment, a movie comes out and gives you like a certain take on what an alien life form would be like, and then the other movies just kind of borrow that idea. But I think it's funner to play with ideas and to make them different and try to imagine something new. Because there's a lot of different possibilities of what life would be like if it, if it existed in another planet, in another place, and then somehow managed to get here. I mean, how different would it be? That's a huge subject. But when they made the aliens, it's like, yeah, it's an alien-looking thing. It was very generic, and it like casually walks down the street.
well,
That's weird.
Signs wasn't really about the aliens, though. To be fair.
Okay. Yeah, you could be right. Yeah.
So
It's been a long time since I've seen it. You could be right.
I'm saying maybe I'll make you watch Signs sometimes, but maybe not.
Possibly.
I'm not actively trying to seek out movies that you don't like, so someday we're going to come across a unicorn that I like that you don't.
Yes. Yep.
So,
it'll be
anything
the
else?
unicorn movie. It'll be about unicorns. BJ loves unicorns.
I actually have a couple of unicorn movies I'm thinking about that might be it, but I'd want to rewatch them again to make sure I still like them.
Yeah.
So, maybe someday, who knows? But anyway.
Yes. This is a good movie. I do like the art gallery where Samuel Jackson, his character, just talks about the artwork and all of the different things you see in the picture. And it's one thing to just look at a piece of art and just be like, yeah, that's what it is. But when you really do a full analysis and of why the artist put things in a certain place and how they fit into the grander scheme, you can't come up with some interesting ideas. And I like his art gallery and how he obsesses over it, and he won't sell things to people unless he feels like they're a good buyer that will take them and appreciate them, to at least correctly appreciate them. So it's all fun. I like it.
Anything else you want to say about the movie?
Nope. That was a good movie.
Okay. So, do we want to spoil what we're watching next time?
Yeah, let's do that.
So,
might as well.
So, believe it or not, we actually have the next movie planned, and Jeff actually planned this one before he picked this one, and it wasn't until yesterday I was like, oh wait, they're both superhero movies, kind of.
That's true. We're now on a superhero theme.
But
They're very different
They're-
superhero movies,
they're-
might I say.
They're superhero movies coming from the exact opposite ends, because next week,
Yeah.
or next time, I should say, we're watching the Batman movie. Not the Michael Keaton Batman, not the Christopher Nolan Batman, the Adam West Batman movie.
Yes, because we are purists. We watched the Batman movie from, what is it, 1960 something?
I guess you could argue that the more modern Batman movies are closer. Well, then again, I guess maybe Batman comics were lighter hearted in the '60s. Who knows? I don't know.
Who
I
knows?
wasn't alive back
We'll
then.
figure something out, and we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about. So yeah, look forward to the Batman movie in a couple of weeks. It's going to be completely different than what we talked about today. Anyway, I'm BJ. With me was Jeff. They didn't call me Mr. Glass. See you next time.